Rizzy ball struck again for the Saints. 2-0 under the interim coach. A lot of Derek Carr, a lot of Taysom Hill. Most importantly, though, the Saints got the job done. Live to see another week. We'll talk about the big win over the Browns right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Huda Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Voglu, and as always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Scott McNair. Injury lawyers have been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, hurt offshore. Scott McNair handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. It's been a really weird season for the Saints, starting off 2-0, losing 7 in a row, firing Dennis Allen, bringing in Darren Rizzi, getting the upset win over the Falcons in his first game as the interim coach. And then today, in what could have been a blowout early, ends up becoming one late for the Saints, where they really found their rhythm offensively against the Cleveland Browns. And a lot of credit goes to Taysom Hill. Obviously, in the stat line, he had over 130 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 8 catches for 50 yards, an interception, an 18-yard completion, and a fumble, and a 40-plus yard kickoff return. Taysom Hill literally did everything today, good and bad, for this team. Lifted them up in certain moments, brought them down in others, but in the second half, he was a one-man wrecking crew. And although the Browns knew the Saints were going to run Taysom Hill, and they knew exactly what play was going to happen when it happened, had no answer for it. And that is kind of the power of using Taysom in that role. And he was just outstanding as this game went on. You saw the Saints wore down this Cleveland Browns front, and just a really nice answer in the fourth quarter to put this game out of reach and improve to 4-7. And I know some people are going to be upset about the draft, stock and what that does to this team, but you like to see them show fight, and you like to see these veterans make big time plays in these moments like Taysom Hill did today. But it wasn't just Taysom. I thought Derek Carr was really, really good today. I think this might have been one of his better games in the Saints uniform. Outside of one throw to Foster Moreau, he didn't really put the ball in harm's way, took what the defense gave him, made some throws on the run, and just looked really comfortable. And even the stat line will kind of show you 21-27, 248 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He really had a nice day at the office, and that's back-to-back games where Derek Carr is in command of the offense, and you feel like him and Kubiak are kind of just on the same page. And that really hasn't been the case for good chunks of this season, but it really is nice to see that. And I think if you're going to give the credit for this Saints W to anyone, I think you pick the 2 quarterbacks per se, the actual starting quarterback in Derek Carr, and then the Swiss Army knife former quarterback in Taysom Hill. They were both outstanding for New Orleans today, so productive. Obviously, Taysom was a little bit more erratic, right? Up and down type of game for him, whereas Derek was just steady throughout. But really good stuff to see. We'll talk about it in just a little bit for that third topic that I want to get to later. But the real question is going to be, can this be sustainable? And can these 2 guys in particular keep making plays for the Saints? And if the answer is yes, that's great for this team. If the answer is no, obviously we're going to have to see where this goes. But the focus is definitely going to be on them, especially because teams are going to really hunker down on stopping AK. As we saw today, I think we saw the Cleveland Browns certain points in the second half where their main focus was shutting down AK. And if they did that, where were you going to turn to? Thankfully for the Saints, Carr and Taysom stepped up. Now, before we get into, the next couple of topics here on the Straight Up Saints podcast, I want to remind you guys, if you have any thoughts on today's game, predictions, suggestions, complaints about anything that went down today, put it in the chat and we'll get to your comments in just a little bit. And also smash the like button. We greatly appreciate it here at Boo Crew Media. So let's keep it rolling. Darren Rizzi, the second Saints coach to start 2-0 since Sean Payton, and the second in franchise history, which is also kind of crazy to think about. Now, could that mean something? Could it mean nothing? I don't know. This is what I could say about Darren Rizzi that I've really liked so far. I love the aggressiveness. Saints really going for it on 4th down, something that I just feel like Dennis Allen would not do. And with Darren Rizzi, you're seeing a coach kind of call plays like, hey, we're not a good team right now. We're under 500. Coming into this game, you were 3-7. And they played like a desperate team. And I love that. So the aggression, you check off that box. I think that is something that the players are going to ride for. I also think in terms of personnel moves, they've done a really good job. I think you look at special teams, you bring in Dante Pettis, who has been for the most part kind of a draft bust out of Washington, and receiver really hasn't done that much. Today, at punt return, I know he ends up stepping out of bounds, but Dante Pettis, his return right there really kind of kicked the Saints into that other gear. You're already up a touchdown, but he gives you great field position, and all of a sudden you feel like, hey, one more touchdown, this game's out of reach. And that's exactly what the Saints ended up doing. So, special teams has been good under him. You love the fourth down aggression. And then one that I don't really think you can technically attribute to him, but it's happened 2 games now with Darren Rizzi at the helm. I don't know what the explanation for this is, but opposing kickers are 1 for 6 on field goal attempts against the Saints in the last 2 games. I don't know how to explain it. I have no earthly idea how this is even possible, but they're missing kicks that are easy. Dustin Hopkins missed a 32-yarder, was fortunate enough that a penalty got called, and then a couple plays later, missed a 27-yarder. So that part's probably just luck. But hey, Dennis Allen didn't have a lot of good luck in New Orleans, and so far, Darren Rizzi's having all the luck. So, like I said, main thing for me has to be aggression and being the type of coach that knows if it's 4th and short, I like our chances running the ball with Taysom Hill, as the Saints did today, and it worked really well. I mean, his second rushing touchdown of the game was in one of those spots where you're going for it on 4th down. You don't just get the first down, you get the touchdown. So I love that aspect of it. And I think for New Orleans, the players are really rallying around him. Defensive linemen like Carl Granderson are sitting there on the sidelines going nuts with Darren Rizzi. That type of energy we didn't see before. So energy, toughness, special teams brilliance so far, they're all going in his direction. And it doesn't mean the Saints are perfect, right? I think the biggest concern I had today watching the Saints, this defense has a lot of issues. And unfortunately, the defensive issues, I think more than anything right now, are personnel problems. I don't think this defensive line is talented enough to really take advantage of poor matchups. Like today, you go up against a Browns offensive line that coming into week 11 gave up the most sacks in the league. And I didn't see enough from the defensive line. There were flashes of brilliance, right? I thought Carl Granderson did a good job on a couple tackles for loss. I thought Chase Young made a nice play in the 4th quarter. Brian Brzee had a coverage sack. Cam Jordan had a nice pressure on a 2-point conversion. Like there's moments, but this defensive line is not good enough to really make an opposing offense's day a living hell. And even though the Browns only had 14 points, it wasn't for the lack of yards, right? Jameis just threw for under 400 yards. And even if you take the yards out of it, right? Outside of airmail in the first couple passes, Jameis was mostly really calm and poised the whole game. Like the Saints didn't put him in spots where he was making turnover-worthy throws. So to me, not having the defensive line hurts. And then secondary-wise, we've seen Alontae Taylor struggle the last 2 games. And I think the biggest problem for Alontae, when you're so close to the line of scrimmage like he's been, your mindset changes, right? I feel like his eyes are in the backfield a little bit too much right now, as opposed to focusing on the guy in front of him who he's supposed to be covering in man. And we're seeing those problems. We saw a communication issue with him in the back end with Will Harris, which is probably Will Harris's fault there, where he should have been in that spot, and Elijah Moore scores the touchdown. But, I'm going to give Rizzy all the praise for special teams and aggression, no doubt about it. Defensively, I don't know if the Saints can fix their problems. And I do wonder when they play a better team, a better offense, they play the Rams out of the bye, or, a couple weeks after that, they play the Packers and they play the Commanders. How are they going to respond to those type of teams? I'm very curious. And obviously time will tell, and we'll see what happens when those games are played. But as awesome as the 4th down offense has been, the offense in general the last 2 weeks has really been cooking. I think the defensive concerns are the takeaway of today. If there's one thing that gives you pause, that's it, right? The fact that, man, the Browns had no problem going up and down the field. They didn't always convert, but they had no problem going up and down the field. So that was the only real negative I had to this game for the Saints. Now, the real question, can the Saints, against all odds, after starting 2-7, make a run and maybe compete in the NFC South? I'll talk about that right after a quick break from one of our sponsors, Scott McNair.
And Jonathan Williams brings it all the way back from the 20-yard line.
What a terrific way to end the first half.
And tonight's game is brought to you by Scott McNair Injury Attorneys. They always fight for the win.
You mean attorney? It's one lawyer. Scott McNair?
No, there's 2.
Brad Scott and David McNair.
Well, it's confusing.
That it is. They could have picked a better name.
Scott McNair, Injury Attorneys, we fight for the win.
Once again, thank you to Scott McNair for being part of the program. Let's keep it rolling here on the Straight Up Saints podcast, and we're going to shift over to maybe the most controversial topic right now regarding the Saints, because I know this is a moment where a lot of people are hoping for them to tank and get a better draft pick. Could they, against all odds at 2-7, make a comeback here to the point where they're competing in the NFC South? That is the question I have for you guys at the moment. Saints are now 4-7. 2 weeks ago, obviously, at 2-7, you're in rough shape. But you win back-to-back games. You go into a bye week now where hopefully guys like Eric McCoy, who got hurt again today, can get the necessary rest to be close to 100%. And Pete Werner, a guy who's played with an injured hand today, maybe he could get closer to 100%. Lucas Patrick could get healthy. That's what the bye week's supposed to be for. So hopefully the Saints can get some guys back in the fold. They're going to get Kendra Miller back at some point. So they're going to get healthy. The question is, did they screw up so much this year where they don't have any room to make a comeback? I think the next couple of weeks are going to determine that, obviously, not just for the Saints' sake, but I think, Atlanta as well. Atlanta plays Denver today. They're already trailing by a touchdown. If Atlanta were to lose that game at 6-5, they'd only actually be 2 games up on the Saints. And technically speaking, you'd have a puncher's chance. And I think what's even more fascinating is Atlanta, next couple of games are not easy for them. So they play the Broncos today. Obviously, Sean Payton would love nothing more than the hand of Falcons, another L. He's done that pretty much his whole career. They play the Chargers after that. Us Saints fans know Chargers are a well-rounded team right now with the way Jim Harbaugh is coaching them up at 6-3. That could very well be another loss. And then after that, at Minnesota, that could be a tough game. So I don't want to say you have to bank on another team's failure, because the last couple of years, all us Saints fans know are, well, if the Saints win these games and those teams lose these games, they're going to be in. And you don't want to rely on other teams to do your work for you. That usually doesn't end up working out for you. And it hasn't worked out for the Saints in the past. In this particular situation, though, with the way they've started, that's their only real route to possibly getting into the playoffs. So at 4-7, right now, you're going to sit back and root for the Denver Broncos. And then during the bye week, obviously, you're going to be rooting against the NFC South. And there is a possibility, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there is a possibility that before you know it, by the time the Saints come out of the bye, in terms of the loss column, they might be just one back of the Falcons, depending on how the next couple of weeks go for Atlanta. Or actually, Atlanta's got a bye next week as well. So when you get back to out of the bye, if the Saints are able to win one against the Rams and Falcons drop another, all of a sudden you find yourself in the thick of things. So it sounds crazy. And I still have so many doubts about this team because I just don't think they're talented enough. I think the Saints do not have enough firepower right now, offensively in terms of skill players, and then defensively in the pass rush and secondary now too, obviously, with Noah Debo due to injury and Lattimore being traded. But I think that technically speaking, as the season stands today, they're technically still in this thing, which is crazy to think about because 2 weeks ago, we're all sitting there on Tankathon looking at who to pick, and some of us are still looking on Tankathon, and that's perfectly okay. But there is a path, but they got to take care of their business, which is the most important thing. Next 2 games against the Rams and Giants. You lose either one of those games, I think it's over. You obviously need to win those 2 games, get to 6-7, and then see how the cards kind of unfold there. That is the key for the Saints. So can they make a run? Yes. Will they? Obviously, time will tell. But I think for New Orleans, their defense is going to need to be a lot better for them to have any chance. I actually think the offense is going to do enough. I think the first half, Clint Kubiak has schemed really, really good drives, especially the opening script for him has been sensational the last couple of games. I think for them, they can manufacture points offensively. And with Taysom, with Alvin, if Derek keeps playing efficient at quarterback, I think they'll have enough guys to gut it out offensively. Defensively, though, next game, you play against Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams. You can't have today's type of effort. You will lose that game. So for New Orleans, next 2 games, what do they do in those 2 spots is going to tell the entire story. But it is kind of wild that if they take care of their business and all of a sudden Atlanta starts slipping up a little bit, NFC South might be interesting going into December, where I didn't think that was going to be the case 2 weeks ago. But such is football and such is this division. This division has been so weird for the last couple of years that anything can happen. So for New Orleans, we're going to see. And I think the next 2 weeks are interesting. I think great coaches always thrive coming off the bye. So I am so fascinated to see, can Darren Rizzi really put the Saints in a good spot coming out of that bye? I think week one for him, his first week, obviously great. Good energy against the Falcons. I think they did a good job today against, obviously against Cleveland. Did a really good job in that second half in the fourth quarter to get things going and put that game away. Now he's going to have 2 weeks to prepare. A sign of a really good coach is putting that extra prep to use, and you see it on full display. And that's why the Andy Reids of the world are always great coming off buys. You give them extra preparation, they're going to make you pay. Not trying to put him in the same sentence as that. But if he wants to show that he can be a head coach, and if he wants to really boost his resume, now he's got 2 wins on it to show for it, come out of the bye and beat a really good head coach in Sean McVay, that's a nice one to put to your resume. Because right now, I know the argument's going to be Saints haven't really beat anyone good. Go beat the Rams. I would consider that a quality win. That's a team that Dennis Allen couldn't beat last year on Thursday night. So I think that's going to be an interesting one for the Saints. But can they make a run? Yep. We'll just see if they do it. So we're going to get into what you guys have to say here on the Straight Up Saints podcast. Before I do that, I want to get a quick word from Theo's Pizza.
Scan the code now and tackle your hunger with Theo's Pizza, your neighborhood pizza with 5 convenient locations. Who dat? Your taste buds are about to find out.
Once again, thank you to Theo's Pizza. So let's keep it going here on the Straight Up Saints podcast and get into our fan Q&A presented by Sunshine, your hometown John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer. We're going to start off with a super chat from Cliff. Thank you so much, Cliff Barber, for the super chat. You said, how about that 75-yarder ripped off by the 34-year-old Swiss Army knife? My man. Yeah, Taysom Hill has been such a weapon. And I think it's pretty awesome that Taysom Hill, even at this stage in his career, still finds ways to make the Saints a better football team. And I know there's such discourse on social media where people talk about, what is he? Is he worth paying? This and that. All I know is that the Saints don't win as many games without Taysom Hill. That's all I know. And I don't know what number you put on that dollar-wise and, years on the contract, but this guy doesn't complain about his role, simply does what he's asked to do. And yeah, there were hiccups today. Some players, the interception, the fumble, that might get in their head. That might really throw them off. There was never a doubt for me that Taysom Hill was going to make a couple of big plays down the stretch. Never a doubt. It was just a matter of when, not if. And, second half, he owned it. And you never want to say another team tapped out because these guys fight so hard to kind of discount them like that. But Cleveland looked just worn down to the point where every time Taysom was running at them, they were kind of thinking, do I got to do this again? Like this, do you want to battle against Taysom Hill in the trenches for all 4 quarters? That shit's got to be exhausting. So Taysom, obviously, with that touchdown run, pretty awesome. Got a super chat here from Carl Markey. Mark said, if we had fired DA in the offseason, promoted Rizzy, then brought in Kubiak, we might have 3 more wins. Eagles, Falcons, and Panthers were winnable. Yeah, I think those are the 3 that I would bring up as well. I think, obviously, the Panthers one is the main takeaway. Had they fired DA after the game against the Chargers, who knows? Maybe this team, instead of 4-7, you're 5-6. And 5-6 looks a lot better on the standings. And all of a sudden, you are thinking a little bit differently about, can you make a run in the NFC South? So I agree with you. As for the Eagles and Falcons ones, Eagles one I think is a big one. I think the Saints lack that aggression with DA. And in that one, I don't know, man. I just feel like they would have been a little different. Falcons as well. I don't know. Let's say you get one of those, though, and the Panthers one at 6 wins. It's a little bit different than being 4-7. So I agree with you. And I have thought about that, right? Had they just pulled the trigger a week earlier, what would have happened? Authentic Dude says, now we're winning, bro. Come on. Our draft pick will be getting worse week by week. Again, I just want to say, guys, I'm not a big tank guy. I'm just not. I think that shit is contagious at times. For me, the way I look at it, I would love to see a guy like Travis Hunter on the Saints, right? But the Saints were never going to get the number 1 pick. They're not bad enough to get the number 1 pick. You got to be really, really bad to get that spot. And they're just not bad enough. And I still think, looking at their schedule, tough game against the Rams, tough game against the Commanders, tough game against the Packers, tough game against the Bucks. There's no guarantee that the Saints are going to keep winning. I would like to see them keep winning because I think it's really, really good for this team right now to continue stacking wins and seeing how it goes, right? At 4-7, it doesn't feel great, right? But you feel a lot better than you did 2 weeks ago, obviously. So I get it. And I know people want to tank, but just have patience too. Like, there is a chance the Saints end up slipping up. This is a bad opponent they played today, and they beat a bad opponent like they're supposed to. Now, next game against the Rams, a step up in class. How do they do? If they win, you should be encouraged by them beating teams that are up a weight class than them. And if they lose, that draft position you want will improve. Forgive says, I know we won, but I'm confident that Kupp and Puka will both have 200 receiving yards apiece. Yeah, I kind of agree with you there at this point. Forgive says, Drew Brees and Lamar Jackson are both the 32nd pick. Justin Jefferson was the 22nd pick. Why do people think if you aren't picking top 5, you're getting a bad player? So this is what I would say about that. And I feel very, very certain about this. I think for New Orleans, my question is, who's in the room making the pick, not who is the pick. Because for all we know, the Saints can continue having the wrong decision makers in there, and no matter where they're picking, they'll be screwed. Whereas if you change the brain operation a little bit, the brain trust of this team, you'll be in a better spot. So I hope that people understand that part. And I agree with what you're saying. Like, it doesn't always matter where you're picking. A draft bust can be a draft bust, whether it's pick 1, whether it's pick 10, whether it's pick 30. It doesn't really matter. You can whiff on the pick. But the Saints have had quality second-round picks. They've whiffed those. Quality third-round picks. They've whiffed those. Quality first-round picks. They've whiffed those. So, like, for me, it doesn't matter where they're picking as much as it matters what is the operation behind the scenes in the front office of who's picking for this team. That is my biggest question. Jacob says, I don't care what anyone says, put Taysom in the Hall of Fame. Fred says, now seems like a good time to say, fuck Dennis Allen. Fred also says, does Alante need a full offseason getting adjusted to the outside, or do you re-sign Adebo and keep Alante in the slot? He seems elite in the slot, in my opinion. Truthfully, I always would love to see how the vision would play out where Adebo and Kool-Aid are on the outside and Alante's in the slot. That's just how I feel about it. Obviously, that can change. I don't know for certain if the Saints are going to switch it up again, but I wouldn't mind to see how that plays out. It really is a shame that Adebo went down because that's what I wanted to see. Because I think Alante Taylor obviously is going to be at his best in that type of situation, right? Where, you know, he's in the slot, he's closer to the line of scrimmage, he can keep his eyes in the backfield at time, and you can use him in those blitz situations. I think he was tremendous at the start of the season. Maybe it does hurt, right? Because outside cornerback rookie year, then you go inside second year, not really playing well. Third year, you're still inside again. You start playing really well, and now you get kicked back outside, and it's been rough. So I kind of understand the concerns there about him, and it's been bad the last 2 games. There's no doubt about it. I do wonder, though, what is going to be the future vision for a guy like him? Because if this is the way he's going to play outside, you're better off keeping him in the slot. Forgive says Zach Wilson and Trey Lance and Trevor Lawrence were all top 2 picks. Knock it off with the draft talk. It's November. Their season's still technically alive. That's how I feel about it as well. I think, for me, if the Saints start rattling off losses here, like they lose to the Rams and Giants, okay, fine. You're 4-9. The season's practically almost over. You're almost at the finish line. You want to talk draft? Let's talk draft. But if they win the next 2 games, I don't want to hear about the draft yet. I don't. Like, the conversation has to be, all right, can they continue to push forward in the standings and maybe steal a playoff spot? Like that's what you would talk about. But I get your point, right? You talk about all these quarterback prospects and whatever. Shit doesn't matter because the NFL is unpredictable sometimes, man. It's so unpredictable. Saints 41 says Saints finished the Browns in the second half. Good win. Saints got rid of the cancer. DA. Blair says D-line finally started getting after that terrible O-line in the fourth. Nice to see Cam play decent. Still need an overhaul, but it was good for a quarter. Yeah, fourth quarter was dominant, in my opinion, in the trenches, both sides. Really stepped up in that regard. Second week in a row that the fourth quarter D-line just really took it up a level. Thought all of them really made plays down the stretch. I still think that this team, though, needs that dominant defensive lineman, right? Like, most good D-lines in the league have one guy on there that you just pinpoint and you know he could take over the game at any moment. Saints just don't have that guy. Like, it doesn't mean Chase Young's a bad player. Obviously, Carl Granderson's not a bad player, but they don't have the dominant player that they once had. Like, they need a prime Cam Jordan to really just lead that unit. They don't have that. I do agree with Cam, by the way. The last 2 games have probably been his best 2 games of the season. It's nice to see him make plays. Doug says, great to see Kubiak finally learning how to use Taysom Hill. I think it's the usage part, right? Like, Kubiak knows how to use him in terms of what's the best role for him, but there isn't consistency in the amount of touches he was getting today. It felt like they said, hey, we got the bye coming up. We give Taysom Hill 40 touches if we want to. Like, who gives a fuck? So it was nice to see the Saints go that route. Cooler Beat says, I want everyone to notice how Rizzy became head coach and the special teams did not regress. Special teams have been great. Special teams have been great. Blake Grupe is going to finish with one of the better seasons that no one talks about as a kicker. I mean, the man is 18 of 19, I believe. So he just doesn't miss. Special teams wise, Hayball's been a fine punter. Return game, Taysom Hill, 40-plus yard return today. Dante Pettis with a really nice return today. So special teams unit, which obviously is his forte, they've been doing their job. Kyle says the run game was at its best. Taysom was unstoppable when Kamara was being Kamara. The pass was good as well. The offense had one of their best performances. You can make an argument the Saints could have put close to 50 today. And for people saying, oh, where'd you get that number from? Taysom Hill fumble. That could have been 7. And then the drive where on 4th down, Derek Carr throws a deep ball to Foster. Foster goes out of bounds around the 5. It gets called back because of holding. That was on 4th and 1. As that holding penalty, let's say, doesn't happen, or if the Saints convert and score on that drive, that's like another 14 points right there. And this should have been an easy 40-point game for them. So the offense is really starting to find its own again. And I would say the first half, when they were really just clicking on all cylinders, I thought it was also a testament to Eric McCoy. When he's in there, they're a better offense. We got to hope that his injury is not serious, but it's so clear when he's in there, there's just a lot more confidence for this Saints team, especially in terms of running the football, getting the screen game going. It's pretty awesome. Xavier says, glad the offense couldn't and didn't take the foot off the gas in the second half. I got a little worried. I'm not going to lie. Third quarter, Saints started stumbling a little bit. I thought, here we go again. You don't put a single point in the third quarter. And then fourth quarter, you put up 21. So obviously that's fantastic. And I think the Saints adjusted well. That's been my biggest knock on Clint Kubiak. As great as he is in the first half, he hasn't been adjusting well in the second half. Today, fourth quarter, when the Saints needed answers, they got the answers. So that was pretty awesome to see. Saints 41 says, like Rizzy, but man, if the Saints can get us a coach close to Mike Tomlin, I would take it. I mean, of course you'd want a future Hall of Fame coach. No doubt about it. Manuel says, other than a couple big plays, feel like Joe Woods has called a pretty good 2 games on defense. Also, Clint adjusted better in the second half today. Hopefully we can keep doing that going forward. Eric says, we're 2-0 with a coach that knows what he's doing. Who dat? Goonie 300 says, here we go with the false hope. Look, understood. It's all measured, though. I think for the Saints, if they lose not next Sunday, they got a bye week. If they lose the Sunday after that, yeah, you fall to 4-8. You don't really want to change. If they beat the Rams, though, there will be a little bit of excitement going into that Giants game, which would be another opponent where you feel like they're gettable, So we'll see what happens. I'm not going to make any promises. I'm not going to make any guarantees for this team. But the whole thing for me, I'm not viewing it as false hope. I don't have expectations of the Saints making the playoffs. But at 4-7, they still got 6 more football games left. So I'm going to try, as long as they're mathematically in this to a degree that doesn't seem ridiculous, I'm going to try to tend towards the optimistic route and have some hope for this team that they can play better football. My expectations are not high, but hope I think is a little different. If the Saints lose that Sunday game against the Rams, I won't be crushed about it, because I'm not expecting a win. Denzel Allen says, I need the Pelicans to follow suit, get rid of the coach and David Griffin as well. See what new coaching and approach can do. The energy shift. I can't speak. Terry says, I'm bittersweet. Browns didn't help Jameis. Jameis played well. I thought Jameis had a good game. Browns are in a tough spot right now. O-line's been banged up this year. Traded Amari Cooper. Just not their year. Just not a good year at all. Cooler Beat says, I get that a lot of fans want to keep losing to get a good pick, but at the end of the day, these are real people with real lives playing this game, so it's whatever. I also want to say, the teams that usually are picking early in the draft, a lot of them are still picking early in the draft. The Jets are always picking early in the draft. The Jaguars are always picking early in the draft. Browns, pre-getting Kevin Stefanski, were always picking early in the draft. And guess what? They're picking early in the draft this year, too. So, yeah, there are exceptions to the rules, right? The Texans getting out of the gutter with DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud, or, Washington now this year, getting Dan Quinn, getting Jaden Daniels, and now they're out of the doghouse. But it doesn't always work like that in the NFL. There are so many teams that stink every fucking season. The Jets bring a bunch of good guys in. There's expectations. They're 3-8. So, I get it. I understand why people want a better draft pick. I would love to see a better prospect on the Saints, like a blue chip prospect that can make this team better for the next 5 to 7 years. But there's no guarantees in football, There just aren't. Cliff says, great move getting rid of Allen. Great win, up and down from Taysom, but always take that W. Who dat? Sergio says, Alante's got to stick in the slot. I kind of agree with you on that one. Kyle says, I was worried about Kubiak not adjusting, especially the run game, but he did adjust. The run game was great and unstoppable. Lawrence of No Area says, thank God Taysom made up for his mistakes. Dude was made for football. Who dat? So I'm not advocating for this person, but I'm going to use something that always used to make me laugh when I would listen to this quote. But John Gruden used to always say, on Monday Night Football, he'd be like, that guy's a football player. He makes plays on the football field. And to me, that's who Taysom Hill is. Don't even give him a position. Just say he's a football player, because The dude just makes plays. Special teams, throwing the ball, catching the ball, running the football. Really does it all. It's insane. Who Dat Forever says, DC looked good today, man. Derek Carr was great today. 21 to 27. You kidding me? Uber efficient, confident, looks healthy out there. And people can quote me. I did not knock him for the Panthers loss because I said he was not healthy enough to play. He should not have played in that game. Look at how he looked in that game. Look at the last two games in just terms of ripping it and feeling more comfortable. He's looked good. And I think now for Derek, can he start doing it against better teams? Like against the Rams in 2 weeks from now, if he has a similar performance, that'd be fucking awesome. I'd love to see that. Kyle says, Rizzy's done a great job so far. The Riz is real. No doubt about it. Bio Boys 504 says, defense just has to tighten up. Yeah, I agree with that. I think the defense has been the big problem for this team. And is part of the reason why I said Dennis Allen should have been out the door, because when your unit starts to struggle, that's all you really got left, right? Once your side of the ball starts to go, there's not a lot to cling on there. Nola Gang 09 says, who dat, everyone? Orange to Nowhere says, Alante's really struggling to find himself right now, but I'm glad to see him keep fighting all game long. Yeah, he made some nice pass breakups later on in the game, which was good to see. You always want your players to continue fighting, and obviously that was the case for Alante. And I'm not worried about Alante mentality-wise. I still think he could be a dog for this team. You just have to start asking the question of, is he capable of being that dog on the outside? On the slot, he played really well, Hey, hope everyone got what they wanted. Cheerleading for Allen to be fired. Now you're in for a much longer stretch of QB mediocrity. All right, so I understand this comment. I just want to say, guys, there is zero guarantee, literally zero guarantee that the Saints would draft a quarterback high in this class and that quarterback would hit. And there's also zero guarantee that just because the Saints aren't going to pick top 5, that they can't get a quarterback in this draft class, that they can't trade up for a quarterback in this draft class. And for people saying, well, I don't want them to trade picks. Well, I mean, they've been wasting nonstop picks every single season. So who cares at this point? So I understand that comment, and I hate to sound like I'm frustrated with it. It's just, did you want them to go 2-15? What message does that send to the players, to the fans, to the organization if they go 2-15 and rattle off a 15-game losing streak? Everyone says, oh, you're stuck in quarterback mediocrity because you can't draft a quarterback. And then I turn to you and I say, I've seen the Jets draft a really good quarterback prospect in Sam Darnold and waste him. I've seen the Jets draft Zach Wilson and waste him. I've seen the 49ers with a great coach draft Trey Lance, and he's stunk. So the Bears get Justin Fields and waste him. I've seen the Bears now draft Caleb Williams, and through 10, 11 games, they look like they're on track to waste him. So the question is always going to be, do you have the coach? And everything else is going to follow suit. I promise you guys that. But I'm not going to worry about their draft pick at the moment and the quarterback mediocrity when I don't even know if they have the coach yet. Once they got the coach, then we'll talk quarterback, because that's what matters in this league. Kyle says the secondary is very concerning without question, and the pass rush was very lacking, but the defense made stops that were needed. Aberrator says it's crazy how a good coach shows how good we really could have been this season. Jack says it's amazing what happens when you fire your garbage head coach. Elijah says 35-14, but we finished the game. Jack says, wonder if Mickey will give credit to Darren Rizzi this week. He only said he provided extra emotion. Yeah, he said he gave a little bit of a lift. 35-14 is a pretty good win. Jerry G says, Saints win 35-14. Oh, happy day. Who dat nation? RG Scott 3X says, the Rizzler 35, Batman 14. DeMonte says, imagine how we would be if Dennis Allen wasn't our coach to start the season. It's a fair question, man. It's a fair question. Let's keep it rolling here with more comments. Whodat712 says, not joking, for at least a soft, if not hard, rebuilding team, middle tier quarterback play is acceptable. Why not roll with Carr for another year? Even if you draft a quarterback, let him sit and learn under a vet. I'm cool with that. And I've been saying, there's no correct way to do this in the NFL. I'm sorry, there's no correct way to rebuilding. There's not a concrete, you do this, you're going to be on track. We've seen teams fail. We've seen teams do great. Texans got out of that rebuild so fast, got the right coach, got the right quarterback, and now they're out of it. Other teams stay stuck. Max with the super chat. Thank you for the support. Max says, Browns seem sluggish on offense. Everything is hard. Yeah, Browns, for them, they were moving the ball through the air really, really well. So I give them credit for that. I think maybe the bigger surprise was just I don't want to say not sticking to the run, but just not having as much success this year as I thought they would. I thought this would be a much better ground attack for them this year, even without Nick Chubb for the majority of the first half of the year. I thought they'd be able to run the football better. They haven't. And even offensively, outside of those big plays where it seemed like it was miscommunication in the secondary for the Saints, there just wasn't really anything they could lean their hat on. And relying on a defense to have miscommunication in the secondary is not exactly a great strategy. Aberator 5 says, I don't think we can make a deep run, but I guess it's possible to somehow squeeze into the playoffs. I mean, I don't expect them to make the playoffs. I still think this is a bottom tier-ish team, but if they keep winning, we're going to keep being here and talking about the standings and where they're at, and we'll see. And if they end up going on a losing streak, obviously we're going to talk about that too and how that affects things. But I just think that the Saints were never going to be bad enough, at least coming into this year, to be picking top 3. And now that they fired Dennis Allen, you're starting to see them bounce back a little bit to the point where they're not going to be picking top 3. There's just too many bad teams in the league this year. Fred says, if you're going to roll Carr back for another year, then this isn't the draft to waste a pick on a quarterback. I think it's all relative, right? If the Saints don't like a quarterback in this draft class, Derek Carr will be their guy for next season, And if there's a situation where they do like their quarterback, then you figure it out, right? You pursue that quarterback in the draft, and you'll see. I think the players in this draft are not the type to sit, right? Shador's got a lot of experience. I don't think that's the type of guy that sits year one. Cam Ward's got a lot of experience at the collegiate level. I don't think he's a guy that sits year one. I also think, though, let's say Shador's off the board. I might be the minority here of this one. I don't think Cam Ward's the type of guy that if you draft him, he's immediately changing the franchise. I think he's going to do a lot of things that will frustrate this team. Holding the ball too long, not having the best internal clock. I think those are things that will frustrate people when watching him. It doesn't mean the Saints can't take him and he can't be great. He could be. But there's no quick fix to this team. And if the Saints don't love this quarterback class, just get good players because they need good football players everywhere. Like I said, they need to improve the D-line. They need to improve the run game. They need to improve their wide receivers. They need to get a better tight end. They need to improve the secondary. Now that Lattimore's out and Adebo, obviously, he's injured and your best corner is no longer on the team. So safety, another position that they can improve. So I'm not really worried about that. If they bring back Carr, I know fans will get frustrated in the moment, and I understand to a certain degree the frustration, but he's not going to be here forever. I think one more year of Derek Carr max is what happens, D23 says, I know we're injured at wide receiver, but dang, MVS, he's been an absolute machine. The man just makes big plays, guys. 2 catches, 87 yards in the touchdown today. 71 of those yards coming on one play. Cliff says, lucky as hell getting to sign MVS. Needed that cap for sure. Yeah, MVS has been a heaven sent for this team. I did not think that he was going to play the way he has, but he's been awesome, So for a team that's depleted, no Olave, no Shaheed, thank God they got MVS. And it's pretty cool to see him out there. And he put on the burners today on that 71-yard touchdown. I mean, I know he's wide open, and I get that. That was a coverage breakdown from the Browns. But the minute he turned upfield around the 50, he was gone. And obviously it helps that, got good blocking upfield from Juwan. Saints 41 says, ball game, Steelers win again. See what I mean? Oh, about Tomlin? Yeah. I mean, the guy wins. Jack says, I know you're very happy the Jets lost again or 3-8. Yeah, at this point, I just laugh because the Jets are like that team where no matter what they change, no matter how much people hype them up, they are still the Jets. And that's why I'm saying, the tank culture can be contagious. Okay? It can. Michael says, Purgatory Saints 7-10, 14th pick. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. And I just want to preface, this team needs good football players everywhere. It's not about getting the 5th pick and all of a sudden that's going to save the franchise. I just don't think it's going to be that simple. I think they need good players everywhere. If they pick 14th, they pick 14th. I could also see them moving up. I feel like the Saints are in trade talks to move up every draft. Xavier says, his coaching interview so far seems to be going well. Hope he can keep it up. For Rizzy, yeah, I mean, Rizzy's 2-0. Next game will be a big test for him. Can you beat Sean McVay, a coach that is, in my opinion, minimum top 5 in this league, probably a top 3 coach? Michael says, I don't see the Saints being able to hang with the top teams. I can't see it. Like the Bills, Ravens, Chiefs, 49ers, Vikings, Packers. Definitely not the first 4. The next 2, I think, are a step down, personally. I think Minnesota defensively has been great with Brian Flores. I still have my questions about Sam Darnold. I think Derek Carr is a much more significantly better quarterback than Sam Darnold. And as for the Packers are interesting because I think there's moments where they look like a Super Bowl contender, and there's moments where Jordan Love is super reckless with the football. And the man's probably going to throw 16, 17 picks this year. So Again, Saints are going to play the Packers, so we'll find out. And I think that should be a fun game if the Saints are healthy and they're able to run the football that game. But I agree with you. I don't think the Saints can hang with the top teams. There's no question about that. And even if you take like the middle tier teams this year, and I know they didn't have Carr, and I know they were banged up, but Chargers game wasn't really close. Broncos game obviously wasn't close. Those are playoff teams for this year. Falcons, you split them, so that's good. Eagles game, you lost that one. Chiefs, relatively healthy in that one. You got blown out. So I agree with you. I don't think they can hang with the top teams. But that to me isn't really the question. It's either the Saints start losing and get a high pick. They're in that kind of middle tier that no one wants them to be in of picking like 10 or 11, or they somehow steal a really bad NFC South. But that to me is the best case scenario for them in terms of winning and the highest they go. This is not a team that's going to be winning playoff games, not anytime soon. No question about it. John says when Dennis lost three games in the final possession of Philly, Atlanta, and Carolina specifically, we may have fired Dennis 1 week too late to make a run at the division title. Really could use that sweep on Atlanta. Yeah, I think it is a very fair point. And I do wonder, knowing how the Saints go, I would not be shocked if we get to week 18. They missed the playoffs, obviously. And we look back and we go, hey, what if they fired him a week earlier? You know, like it is very possible you reach that point. And I think it would be typical of the Saints. Bio Boys 5-4 says, just think about if they would have fired DA earlier. John says, easy schedule ahead with a ton of home games. Remaining schedule, bye week, LA Rams, at Giants, versus Washington, at Packers, at Raiders, versus Tampa Bay. Yeah, I think for this team, truthfully, I think there's at least 3 more wins there. So at least 3. But let's say there's at least 2. They're at least winning 6 games this year. And I know people aren't going to like that. But they're at least going to win 6 games. The real question is, how do they look against the Rams, the Commanders, and the Packers? Do they look decent? That's nice to see. Do they win some of those games? That's great. If they were to win 2 out of those 3 games, there's going to be an interesting conversation about Rizzy, because I think the conversation right now is, okay, they're winning games against opponents that they can beat. And, you know, you have that early energy of the interim coach shaking up the vibe in the locker room, getting everyone's best effort. And I get that. But if they start winning games against opponents that you know they weren't going to win with Dennis Allen, I think that's going to be interesting. Because, again, I'm not saying that Darren Rizzi should be the full-time head coach next year. But New Orleans is in such a weird spot where I don't think they're going to be able to get, you know, everyone's top choice. Because everyone says, I want Ben Johnson on the Saints. And I understand that. Ben Johnson's not coming to the Saints. To me, he's not coming. The cap space, not going to be able to have a full array of weapons. I just can't see a guy who's running an absolutely loaded Detroit offense coming to New Orleans and saying, okay, Derek Carr with an older Alvin, with an older Taysom Hill, and 2 wide receivers who are really fun but get injured, those are the ones that I'm going to roll with. I just can't see it. So if Rizzy starts winning games against quality opponents, it's going to help his resume when it comes time for the Saints to go through the interview process. John says, say it louder, this draft isn't special in the top 10. The year to talk about tanking is next year or 2026. Michael says, okay, so continue on into next year with an even older roster and another year of purgatory. Saints can't even draft well with later first-round picks. Look, the way I feel about this Saints team is I don't think they're getting out of the shitter until 2026 anyway. Like, I think this team genuinely is in a spot where, because of their cap situation, next year, I don't want to say throwaway year, but they're not a Super Bowl contender next year, obviously. They're not going to have the cap resources to spend. They're not going to be a good enough roster. They're just not. And it's not really until 2026 where you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel financially. And then, obviously, when you get to 2027, then you feel a lot better about your situation. But next year, I always felt like was going to be kind of a throwaway year anyway, to me. So they're going to have to keep some of these older guys regardless next year. The real question is going to be, can they not spend as much next season or next offseason so the bill isn't too expensive for other years? And I think because they've realized they're no longer a contender, thank God they've realized it, I don't think they're going to start restructuring contracts like crazy. I think they're going to do the bare minimum, and that's it. Sci-Fi X says, how do you feel about Taylor playing outside corner? He's getting exposed a lot more now. Yeah, I think the Saints are going to have to make a decision for this team. You know, I think that obviously the rest of the season, I think it's fine to keep rolling him out there. You're going to have to figure out where do you want him to be? There's 6 games left. If it gets to the point where it's so detrimental to the team, obviously kick him inside. I don't think leaving him out there for no reason is a good thing. But If he starts playing a little bit better and there's kind of ups and downs to it, ride it out, because 6 games left. You got to figure out what you want this guy to be next year on your team, because obviously he's going to be a big part of their defense next season, and you have to figure that out. Ricky says, how hurt is our center? I haven't seen anything yet on McCoy. Hopefully that comes out soon. But obviously him being questionable, return with another groin injury is not ideal. Bye week, though, that is ideal, But we'll see. We'll see if we get a good update on him. Hopefully they do, because the offense is 10 times better when he's in there. Hale Mendoza says, real quick, everyone acknowledge your tribal chief, Taliesin Fuaga. He shut down Myles Garrett all game. If Fuaga was great today, another reason of why, for me, it's who's the player, not where were they picked. And for New Orleans, that's what your picks need to be, because they've invested a lot in the trenches. They need to be more like this guy. You need to hit on these picks, Denzel says, love seeing Rizzy celebrate and interact with the players. HCat says, I had Taysom on my bench in fantasy, never been so mad about Hill popping off. That's funny. D23 says, Rizzy become an head coach and all of a sudden opposing kickers can't make a field goal. Coincidence? Sci-Fi X says, I hope McCoy injury doesn't make him miss any more games. I hope not, man. I hope that he's fine. The last thing you want is for him to miss another extended stretch because of the groin injury. Michael says they rushed McCoy back. It is possible. Groin injuries are so tricky. Groin, hamstring, those type of injuries, you might think you're ready, and all of a sudden you make one wrong move, and you're like, fuck, I'm out for another 4 weeks. So I don't know. I don't know if he was rushed. Don't feel like he was. Timeline-wise, he got injured in week 3. They said he could miss anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. And today was the 8-week mark. So I don't know. I don't really think he was rushed, but it's just those soft tissue type injuries they're kind of a bitch. Ivan says Fuaga had Myles Garrett serving a prison sentence, locked him all the way up. Hale Mendoza says, as long as we don't play the Lions, I'm good. Breezy D says, what do you think about Fuaga today? I think Fuaga is a special player. That's the way I feel about it. I think he's going to be a special player in this league. Carl Markey Marks with the super chat. Thank you so much for the support. Says one more thing. Gale is looking good right now. Loomis is being exposed as the cancer killing this team. I hope he gets demoted or moved. Ideally, kind of move him into that presidential role and then get another football mind in there. Maybe that football mind is going to help the Saints into that next era of what could be hopefully successful football in New Orleans. But yeah, Gale's looking like a real winner right now, and Gale's looking like a good owner right now. Now, the mark of a good owner is to continue making the right moves. So we'll see if she can continue making the right moves. And if that means stepping in and saying, hey, we got to tweak things in the front office, all power to her. But yeah, I think if she didn't step in, we'd probably be looking at the Saints being 2-10 right now, or no, I can't do math. 2-9 right now. So kudos to Gale. Her listening to the players and understanding, hey, they don't want this guy as their head coach. They're not responding to his message anymore and making the move. Sign of a good owner for sure. Kennedy says a healthy Taysom Hill is the difference with this team. D. Carr also played well. Yeah, Derek Carr played really well. D23 says, I didn't realize you could do a John Gruden impression. LOL, Frank Caliendo over here. I used to love watching those Frank Caliendo videos, man. Loved watching him do the Gruden impression, and then Mel Kiper. I love when he would do Mel Kiper with the messed up hair and be like, Todd. Like that stuff used to crack me up. Michael says, so are we now saying this team isn't in rebuild mode? No, I still think this is a rebuilding team. But it's I hate using this word because it's such a cop-out, but this is genuinely where the Saints feel like they're at. They feel like they are in a retool. Like, they're not good enough to contend, but they're not bad enough to go 3-14. So that's just kind of where I think they're at. I still think they're going to lose a couple more games on this schedule. I don't think this is a talented enough football team. But they're also, between the way they're playing right now and some vets stepping up, and look, if that trio of Carr, Taysom, and Alvin continues to play well, they're going to stay in football games. So a lot of those rebuilding teams can't really offer that. Look at Tennessee right now. Like, what the fuck are they offering? I don't know what Tennessee gives you on a day-to-day basis. The Giants, keep rolling Daniel Jones out there. You're not doing much. So I still think this is a rebuilding team. I don't think that's the question. I just don't think they're bad enough in the grand scheme of rebuilding teams for it to look objectively awful like it did prior to Dennis Allen getting fired. Just Call Me Trey says, with Rizzy, we got the D-line playing better and with more energy. Also crazy how Taysom made the most mistakes today and was the best player. Love that stuff. Good stuff. Not going away from him. Yeah, I think that is a sign of a really good team in terms of knowing what they got in terms of Taysom Hill as a playmaker. because some coaches might want to go away from him. When you start making mistakes like that, and it probably is easy to go away from. You'd be like, dude, Taysom, we should be up 21-6, and that fumble really screwed us over. Or maybe more than 21-6, that fumble and that interception really screwed us over. So for them to stick with him, I thought was awesome. Lala says we need to get rid of Willie Green now. And look, man, I know Pelicans are not in a good spot. That's what I'll leave it at. Michael says, think Taylor is more of a slot than an outside cornerback. I feel that way. Paul says, do you trust Mickey Loomis with this retool? I doubt it. I do not. If you want my just objective answer, I do not. Xavier says, would love the running back from Boise. Yeah, Ashton Jetty would be fucking awesome to watch. Him and Alvin would be such a fun duo. You got kind of the seasoned vet, who I still think is a great playmaker, and then the young buck, who I think is going to be one of the better running backs in this league as long as he could stay healthy. Zay says Carr has been good for most of the year. If we're going to be real honest about Derek Carr, so let's get to him real quick. He was great against the Panthers week 1, great against the Cowboys week 2. Then he was also good against the Falcons and then good against the Browns. Bad games, I thought he was kind of bad against the Eagles. I did not think he was good against the Chiefs. That pick early sunk him. And he was not good against the Panthers. So he's had more good games than bad games. The one that I'm not counting is the Falcons one. I know he had the pick 6, and that's easy to dump on him. I don't think he was the main culprit for that, them losing that game. Milton says, how is Taysom not going to be NFC Offensive Player of the Week? I think he's got to be, right? He's got to be. The problem for him, though, is if we look at what this team is, not what this team, what this league has done today, a lot of players have put up really big performances. I mean, the Lions, I feel like they're dropping 50 every fucking week. It's insane. So Taysom might get screwed from that regard. I hope, though, he does get NFC Offensive Player of the Week because, like I said, what other player is putting up 3 rushing touchdowns, over 130 rushing yards, 8 catches for 50 yards, an 18-yard completion, a 40-yard kick return? I know he had the fumble and the pick, but I mean, that's a crazy stat line for him. Ryan says, to be honest, I hate when fans cheer for a tank. They act like the only good players are in the first 10 picks. LOL. Gibbs 12th pick, for example. Yeah, I mean, it's also just not fun rooting for your team to lose. I'm sorry. Like, deep down, if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I thought it would be best for the Saints to lose against the Carolina Panthers. And when the Saints lost, I kind of just laughed. The minute that game was over, though, I was like, dude, I cannot be rooting against the team. Like, when Dennis Allen got fired, I'm like, this is not happening. Like, I'm not rooting against the Saints. It's just not flowing. I can't root for them just to get excited about a pick that they might fuck up anyway. Like, if there was a guarantee, then yes, maybe mentality switches, but there's no guarantees in this league. D23 says the Saints got Marshawn with a mid-first round pick and rebuilt the team in 2017 draft. It can happen. Stockpile picks, clear some cap, and address issues between the draft and free agency. Ideally, yes, that would be what you'd want. That's the hope. Goonie 300 says, and people say coaching doesn't matter. I mean, we're seeing it on full display right now already. In 2 games, Rizzy has as many wins this season as Dennis Allen had in 9 games. Kind of freaking nuts. Paul Parker says, no inside hiring. Please get away from the Sean Payton era. I think that's fine. If they're not, again, I still think they're going to look at Rizzy because he's the interim guy right now, and I think they're going to look at Aaron Glenn because of their history with Aaron Glenn. I wouldn't mind for them to move out of that, move away from what they've known. But I'm also going to be fair, and I think one thing about football is we get new information every week. And I think Rizzy's going to have a chance here to show what he can do over the next, 6 games. This team finishes 9-8, let's say. And I'm not expecting him to finish 9-8, by the way. I'm not at all. I'm not even expecting him to finish 8-9. But if he wins, 6 games with this team as the interim, that's pretty damn impressive, and it's hard to knock that. If Aaron Glenn, his defense, is the culprit behind the Lions winning the Super Bowl, hard to go against that, So I'm not saying I want them to stick with the Sean Payton era. I'm a big advocate of them moving on. I think it's you got to let things die sometimes. But we're going to get new information over the next 6 weeks, and then the playoffs for guys like Aaron Glenn, and I'll see how it goes then. And my opinion's subject to change. Blair with a super chat. Nothing to add. Super chat because you entertain me every week. Thank you for the support, Blair. I greatly appreciate it, man. I try my best. I think days like today is tough because I know there's a good contingency of Saints Twitter that probably is like firing up the mock drafts and seeing that the Saints right now are projected to pick 10th, and that just feels like a dagger to the heart. But not me. I'm 6 weeks left. I had fun today watching this team. I had fun watching this team. The way they operated, Taysom Hill going beast mode in the second half was pretty awesome. So that was fun. I still have concerns, right? There are a lot of concerns about this team, but that was a fun one. Xavier saying Denver up 14-3. Saints might have kicked Atlanta into a losing streak. I'm just saying, if they lose today, their next 2 games after that, against the Chargers, against the Vikings, that all of a sudden, that becomes a 4-game losing streak if you don't get out of it quick. So it's pretty interesting. Fred says, comparing Rizzy to Antonio Pierce is a little disingenuous. I don't think he is the higher, but it's not remotely the same. Yeah, I don't think he's the same either, personally. And to be honest, what's fair is fair. I did not think the Raiders should have hired Antonio Pierce. I just didn't feel it, you know? And this isn't to say that I'm just trying to defend Rizzy here. But if Rizzy takes a team that looked completely lifeless at 2-7, and all of a sudden we get to mid-December and they're vying for a playoff spot, it's a different conversation, you know? Cool Sports Rhyme says, I have mixed feelings about us winning, but it's obvious Dennis Allen was a big problem. Our guys are playing harder under head coach Rizzy. They are playing much harder. There's no question about it. Energy's great. Rizzy's side of the ball, special teams, is still thriving for this team. That's been a big factor for the Saints. There's a lot of teams that lose on Sundays because they're not good on special teams. The Saints are not one of those teams. They might lose on Sunday, but they don't lose on Sunday because of special teams. So that's been big for them. Defensively, defensive line is not good enough. Fourth quarter, though, last 2 games, defensive line has stepped up. I have questions about the secondary, but I think that might be a talent deficiency more than it is just bad coaching. But I do think the Saints are going to have to figure out what the hell to do with Delonte Taylor if his struggles continue. And then offensively, they've opened it up the last 2 weeks. Screen game's been good. Taysom utilization today was outstanding. Guys like Marquez Valdes-Scantling are making plays out of nowhere. So getting the best out of your guys is important. And I think Rizzy's doing a good job of that. And it's all about messaging now. Like, he's got 2 weeks to get these guys ready for a game at home against the Rams. And I know the Rams are a good team, but that is a winnable game. That's not a game you chalk up as an automatic L. Zay says, Saints are the 16th oldest team in the league. We aren't that old. If you take DeMario, Carr, Cam, and Taysom off the team, we're like 24th. That's the thing. The Saints, the age of this team is kind of hampered by having a lot of like really old players. DeMario really old. Carr's getting up there in age. Cam really old. Tyrann Mathieu really old. Taysom really old. So like they got 5 players on this team that are really old. Even Alvin's getting up there in age, but not like egregiously old. But when healthy, they also have some younger guys that are going to be hopefully big pieces for them. You hope Alante can bounce back. You hope Kool-Aid becomes something great. Fuaga obviously has potential. Trevor Penning, there is ups and downs, but he's been a starter all year long, which is great to see for them. Eric's still kind of entering the prime of his career. So they got to get younger, obviously, and they got to get more depth. There's no question. I think depth's the biggest problem for this team. They just don't have any. But the age thing, like average age, I'm not that concerned about. A lot of these guys won't be playing for the Saints in 2 years from now. Hale Mendoza says, if I could be frank, Penning has looked more polished of note. Improvement maybe, hopefully. I think he has improved dramatically. Like, we've reached the point where Trevor Penning is not sinking the team on Sundays. And that used to be the concern with us, especially last year, as us fans watching him. It's not the case. There's still going to be penalties from time to time. He had a holding penalty today that was pretty frustrating. But Trevor Penning is not sinking this team. And I am very interested to see what is the growth for him. Can he take one more leap like he took this year? Because right now he's turned himself into a starter. If Trevor Penning can do what he did last year to this year again, all of a sudden you're talking about a really big impact player, and you're not feeling like that was a wasted draft pick, which is vital because you don't want to be wasting those. Michael says, I'm not being negative. I just don't want us to get our hopes up and we lose to the good teams remaining on our schedule. That was all, thinking we could get to the playoffs. No, I get that, Michael, and I don't take it that way at all. I'm just trying to come from my standpoint. I don't view this as a team that is going to do great things this year. I don't. I think that they are, just going to fight and scratch and claw, and they're probably going to lose more games than they win, as we've seen at 4-7. They've lost more than they've won. I just don't think they're going to be a god-awful, especially with Rizzy now for the rest of the season, god-awful lose every game type of team as we've seen. So that's just where I'm at. I still think they need a lot of work, though. There's no question about it. So much work. Michael says, very surprised Kubiak adjusted, very surprised defense stepped up. Both did its thing. The defense, I'll give them credit. Last 2 weeks in the fourth quarter, when they've need to make the big plays, they've made them. And that's something we didn't get to say a lot with Dennis Allen. Michael says, DA destroyed the Raiders. DA destroyed the Saints. I believe DA destroyed Carr. I believe Carr is better without DA. I mean, his best season ever is without DA. So I would agree with that. I mean, his best season is 1,000% without DA. Ed says Saints look good. Secondary pass rush suspect. McCoy made a difference for sure. Hale Mendoza says Falcons losing would be icing on the cake. That'd be huge for the Saints. Back-to-back weeks to get a win while the Falcons lose. And that's how all of a sudden you make ground. And they would have gone, if this were to happen, from 4 games back to 2 games back in the blink of an eye. Tanking is for losers. Kind of is. I mean, as someone who's, you guys know I'm born in New York. Those New York football teams lose an awful lot, guys. An awful lot. And it's become kind of their MO. And I hate that. D23 says, regardless of the outcome, seeing Rizzy on the sideline actually caring, unlike DA, makes me happy. Players love him. It shows in their reactions and also in their play. And that is the most important part, their play, like you mentioned. Ed says, the more they win, the more you get upset about Falcons and Eagles losses. Shaking my head. Yeah. I mean, I was mad about those losses when the losing streak started. Like, when they lost to the Chiefs and they lost to the Broncos, I'm like, man, had you won those 2 games, everything is just easier to accept. But it does get frustrating, right? Because as they get closer to the December, you're going to be like, man, had you not blown those games, maybe you're in a better spot. Milton says, hold out for Arch Manning, full circle, Archie to Arch. Would be pretty awesome. John says, it's nice to have good vibes on the pod after like 11 months of the Fire Dennis Allen pod misery. I'm happy. I agree, John. I hated. People thought I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it from a comedic standpoint to come on here and just start yelling and laughing about how bad they were under Dennis Allen at times. I was not enjoying how this team played under Dennis Allen at all. And the last 2 weeks, I've had fun. I've had fun sitting back watching this Saints team, writing my little notes down, and just going from there. Andretti says Saints really need a gangster on that D-line. They need a dog, man. They need a dog in the worst way possible. I agree with you. Milton says Carr will be the quarterback next year anyway. I tend to agree with you. I think that's where it's heading. Cool Sports Rhyme says, what do you think about this O-line? Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, Fuaga, Trevor Penning, Will Campbell. I mean, you'd hope that line can be dominant for years to come, obviously. But if I had to guess, I don't think Will Campbell will be playing for the Saints next year. I could be wrong, but I don't know. I just don't know if they'll go O-line again. But, man, that would need to be – you would need to just kick everyone's ass in the trenches. And on paper, you would hope they can. Rizzy is the winningest head coach in the league right now. Technically is 2-0. El Mendoza says it's definitely been a rough season for the Saints, but like always, in the NFL, it could be always worse. Like it could have been the Jags or the Jets. Saints fan till I die. I mean, look at the Jaguars. Before today's game, a report comes out that if they get blown out to the Lions, by the way, without their starting quarterback, that they're going to fire Doug Peterson. What the hell did they think was going to happen? Of course they were going to get blown out today. This is not how you run a team. Even the Saints, and they frustrate me sometimes. The way they handled the Dennis Allen firing was the best possible way. We didn't hear shit behind the scenes, and then Gail just comes in one day and says, you know what? We're firing this guy because these players aren't listening to his message. And no one knew about it till the day it happened. That's the way it should be. Not like the Jets where their quarterback goes on Pat McAfee's show and throws all his teammates and coaches under the bus, and not like the Jaguars who they literally threw their coach under the bus before today's game. Like that's just not the way to operate a team. Randy says Alontae Taylor has got his work cut out for him against those Rams receivers. I am worried about that one, man. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua can put in work. There's no question about it. Space African Jesus with a super chat. Thank you so much for the support. Says, I know people are concerned about the draft pick, but I'll never be opposed to Taysom Hill going Super Saiyan. Yeah, I think Taysom going beast mode is the best thing in the world. The best thing in the world. I think of today's game. I think it was 2 years ago against Seattle. I think it was the 2022 season that he went just absolutely apeshit. So I love when Taysom Hill has these type of games where he just, I don't want to say put the team on his back, because obviously I thought Carr played really well today. And it'd be unfair to say Taysom was the only one who played well. But in the fourth quarter, to just put everyone, at ease by just taking over, pretty damn awesome to see. So, I'll never be opposed to that. Never. Fred says, speaking of special teams, now seems like a good time to say fuck Lou Hedley. Yeah, Lou Hedley was an interesting one. That was the Dennis Allen era in a nutshell, right? Lou Hedley was not punting the football well, and there was never any consequences for him not punting the football well. It was insane. Ed says, New York City born too. Don't ask how I've been a lifelong Saints fan. Everyone always asks that. They're like, oh, well, where are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm born in New York. I'm like, how the hell did you become a Saints fan? I'm like, it's a long story. And it's weird. But thank God I did, because I'm telling you, man, Giants and Jets, get the hell out of here. No way I would be able to do that. Cool Sports Rhyme says, but if we would have won those games, then DA wouldn't have been fired, though. I think that's fair. There's a give and take to it. I'll put it that way. There's definitely a give and take to it. D23 says, did you see Chase Young run on late and then immediately get a tackle for a loss? It was insane. I don't even think he really got set. I think he just got onto the field and made a winning play for this team. And by the way, that is back-to-back weeks where Chase Young has made a really big-time play for the Saints in the fourth quarter. Last week, knocking the ball out of Kirk Cousins' hands. This week, obviously, that tackle for loss. So got to give credit to guys like him. I mean, it would be so easy for them to check out. And these guys seem like they've completely bought back in, and that's awesome. Milton says, Cam Jordan's playing much better for Rizzy. Yeah, it's nice to see Cam doing his thing, right? Cam's obviously going to be near and dear to all Saints fans' hearts. So to see him playing at this level is pretty awesome. So if you guys have any other comments you want to get to, we'll do that in just a minute or two. I just want to get a quick word for one of our sponsors, DraftKings Sportsbook.
The NBA is finally back. A new season means new ways to get into the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Who's draining threes from behind the arc? Who's crashing the boards and grabbing rebounds? Get behind your favorite players and the prop bets you can make on DraftKings Sportsbook, the home of the NBA player props. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking your team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. First time? New DraftKings customers bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code BOOT. That's code BOOT, B-O-O-T, for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gambling resources, see dkng.co/BBALL.
Once again, thank you to DraftKings Sportsbook for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. Going to get into any other comments we have here, and then we'll get into our closing arguments here. Zay says, got to bring back Chase Young. He's only 25. Look, Chase is going to have a chance the next couple of games to continue playing well. I don't think his market's going to be crazy. I just don't. And if New Orleans feels like there's a deal to bring him back, all right, fine. I still think they need D-line help. I think the concern for a guy like Chase Young is committing long-term, you know? Zay says Taylor's also struggling, but it's been a while since he's been full-time on the outside. Give him some time. It's only been a few games. Him and Kool-Aid are young, and the pass rush isn't the best. Yeah, and I think, look, the next 2 weeks are pivotal, right? You got the bye week, got some time to maybe get back, get to playing better football for him, get more comfortable playing on the outside again, and we'll see how he does. And he's going to be tested coming out of the bye week, right? It's not going to be easy because you got the Rams, obviously, with their duo and Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. And then the following week, yeah, the Giants aren't a good football team, but Malik Neighbors obviously is a sensational rookie. And even guys like Darius Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson, really good receivers too. You know, Giants don't lose games because they don't have receiver talent. They have that. It's everything else that's just kind of been a problem for them. Marcus says Saints need to re-sign MVS in the offseason. Imagine him with Olave and Shaheed. Would definitely have speed. You know, we'll probably need a more physical receiver out there, but definitely we need speed. Milton says they have to give Young a contract. He hasn't nearly hit his ceiling yet. I agree on that part. I don't think he's hit his ceiling yet. Milton says, how was MVS even sitting on his couch? To be honest, guys, MVS was not good the last couple seasons. You know, my first thought of him is dropping a wide open touchdown pass from Patrick Mahomes. But he's locked in. He's playing great football. So clearly he was ready for this moment, and he's picked a good spot. You know, like, yeah, he won't be on a contender, but he's getting opportunities, and next year he might be able to get cash in elsewhere. Maybe he sticks with the Saints, maybe not. Mo says Rizzy showed something good today when momentum shift and they faced some adversity. He kept the team locked in. So same with Taysom, fumble in the red zone. DA would never. That's a really good point. You know, how do you respond? I think the Saints of old with DA probably lose today's game when it got to 14-14? You probably don't feel as comfortable. New Orleans ends up putting 21 unanswered with Rizzy. Frankie says, anyone heard from Michael Thomas? Nope. I mean, that it's been fairly silent over there. So I don't know, man. I'll always love MT, but I don't think MT will be playing elsewhere anytime soon, at least. That's just kind of what I feel about that situation, Zay says DA is the worst motivator of all time. It kind of feels that way. I thought it was pretty cool on the broadcast. They were talking about the sledgehammer thing with Rizzy and kind of talking about how these guys have to put their hard hats on and go to work. So what's the next message? What's the next tactic? I don't know, but I'm excited to see it. So anyway, guys, as we get to the tail end of our show, I want to bring us to our closing argument presented by Scott Fickner, Injury Lawyers. I think it's pretty simple at this point, right? For us Saints fans, you spend the rest of your Sunday watching the Falcons game. You hope they're losing. Right now, they're down, I believe, 20-6. I think the score is against Denver. If Atlanta loses, all of a sudden the Saints are only 2 games back of the division. Obviously, that would be pretty, pivotal for them. But next 2 games coming out of the bye, how do you play against the Rams? A step up in weight class for Darren Rizzi and the Saints. If they win that game, momentum starts to shift even greater than it already has. And then you could go into that Giants game playing with a lot more confidence. So that's the focus. Hoping for the Falcons to lose today, and then enjoy the bye week for New Orleans, and make sure you have a good game plan intact for a Rams team that's been pretty good at times this year when they're healthy. So we'll see what happens, but another good win for New Orleans today. Can they continue to stack them, or will this kind of boost that they've gotten from interim coach Darren Rizzi eventually wear off? We're going to find out, because the Rams game is going to be a nice test for this team. But that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I want to thank you guys, as always, for your thoughts, your comments, super chats, all the support. You guys have been tremendous all season long, and I can't wait to talk more football with you guys in 2 Sundays from now when they play the Rams. As always, we're going to have coverage throughout the bye week here at Boo Crew Media and on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.